And this is our dualistic thinking, right? These notions that we must oppose the thing that we don't align with, when really in truth, we're more likely to benefit from just aligning with what aligns. The opposition part of us doesn't have to exist this way. We can have peace and harmony without sort of condemning anything.
Hello, my friends. Hi, this is Marthe with Universal Power Tarot, and these messages or this conversation that we're bringing you today are supposed to encourage, elevate, and empower you guys. Hi, everyone. Hi for being there. And hi, Seankelly, for joining us today.
Hello,
hi,
hello.
So stoked to have you.
Thank you. I'm excited. I'm excited.
Awesome. So Sean and I actually decided, or I actually reached out to Sean, who has a YouTube channel, which is called Seankelly, so his name. And it used to be called How to Hero, though, in case you've been following him for this. He also has an Instagram, which is named Words of a Wizard. If you want to check that out, we'll put all the links down below.
Thank you.
But without further ado, maybe we should speak a little bit on how this came together, just briefly, so that people know, because
Sure.
Sean posted something about narcissism.
It's a juicy topic, right?
Totally. And I responded to that, and that kind of sparked a conversation between him and I, because he was so kind to offer to open the dialogue. And I'm totally for that, opening the dialogue, and I very much appreciate that. And so I just said, you know what, because the dialogue was so great and I just gotten so much out of it. So I thought, why not invite Sean to the channel? Because I know that you guys can very much profit from that.
Thank you so much. I'm so honored. I appreciate that. I often, I tend to speak on topics that are a little bit polarizing, right? Things that people have had deep challenges in their lives. Sometimes when I'm writing, that can come across in ways that I don't necessarily intend. And it triggers, I think, in people some different types of responses. And so it's really nice to be able to, we got in contact about narcissism and kind of talked about it. And it's really nice to be able to have those expanding conversations, right? To be able to sort of zoom out a bit and try to unify. I like to try to neutralize, try to depolarize, bring together, instead of them and us and victim mentality. I like to try to bring it back, right? Bring back our power, really, if that makes sense. Yeah.
It makes a lot of sense, especially what you said, because before that, I was kind of like in the technical stuff, and I was like working through the emotional stuff as well. And as I've been doing, as you guys know, like on my channel anyways, I've been working through that stuff with you guys. And we have the Fellow Seekers group where we also touch on a lot of those topics, just because, to trigger healing, not just in ourselves, but in ancestral lineage and whatnot. And so it was really interesting for Sean to bring me back to the energetics of it, because in all honesty, I had not thought about it. And you said something about solar plexus that I found really interesting. I was like, wow. And you actually brought me back to a different mindset. I wasn't, opposed, anti, people. And first of all, maybe I should clarify. We're talking because the word narcissist is so overused, I feel, in social media or wherever in conversations. What I'm talking about is NPD, so the narcissistic personality disorder, whether diagnosed or no, but the heavier stuff is what I want to say. And Sean actually said that he believes that people can, with that disorder, can heal themselves. And you have such interesting viewpoints on this. And I'm just like, yes, I love it. Could you touch on, please, the solar plexus and the other energetics?
Sure. So maybe just for a moment, I'll just give people a little bit of my background. Just so that they can understand where I'm coming from, because I'm not coming from a place of humanly thought so much. So the rational side of our mind, the scientific, I do incorporate that, but more I'm speaking metaphysics, energy, vibration, and frequency, which is the forming of consciousness itself, right? So everything that we experience here is a reflection of that consciousness. And so that's the level that I try to speak at. So when we get into a lot of the medical and the pathology and symptomology of things, we tend to box ourselves into labels and get really stuck, I find. And so my background is, I was an IT guy. I was an analytical IT atheist. You know,
wow.
And when I was 33, I had a spontaneous Kundalini awakening.
Wow.
I didn't know what any of this was. And I woke up and I was like, wow. And I started feeling Jesus and the Christ in me sort of awakening. I started to have sort of conversations with the Divine Mother, and to bring Christ consciousness back here, and to try and to help people recognize themselves again.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm coming from. I'm coming from love and unity and harmony with all beings. So when we get into conversations like this, there's lots of pain, right? Lots of trauma, lots of uncomfortable feelings around what happened to us in our experience as humans here, with people that have acted in their, deep self-interest and manipulative, whatever it was. And what I try to do is zoom out of this and try to remember the divinity in everything, and all of the beings involved. And this can be a little bit challenging for people. So I like to preface any of these types of discussions with that like, if anything that I'm saying comes across as condoning any type of bellicosity or conflict-driven behavior, that is not my intention. Right. So sometimes as humans, I think we can feel that in order to do the right thing, we have to oppose the wrong thing. And this is our dualistic thinking, right? These notions that we must oppose the thing that we don't align with, when really in truth, we're more likely to benefit from just aligning with what aligns. The opposition part of us doesn't have to exist this way. We can have peace and harmony without sort of condemning anything. And this is where we start to find that peace. But in order to do that, we have to address some of these conflicting and paradoxical, polarizing concepts. Like, if we're all divine, then how could they do that to me, right? Like, it doesn't make sense to our mind too much. So anyway, so that's sort of where I'm coming from and my background. I'm not a psychologist. I studied, of course, psychology and psychiatry, neuroscience, all of these things. And then I had this spontaneous awakening, and suddenly now I call myself a wizard. So, it is what it is. And essentially, if anything I'm saying, it disturbs anyone listening or feels uncomfortable, please know my heart's in the right place. I'm just trying to bring healing is really what my goal is, to help people remember their own power, because all of this pain is a result of us giving our power away. Right. In my experience, that's what I would say, is that's what it all is. It's all giving our power to the external, right? So
absolutely,
I try to bring people home as best I can. Yeah.
I love that. I really love that. And it's so interesting. It's also from my experience, what you're saying, it really does bring you back in a major way to step into your own power. And you really have to face a lot of shadow first, though, I feel, before this can even be possible. So I have a question to you, if that's okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, of course.
Yeah. How, because you said Christ consciousness, and interestingly enough, we haven't spoken on this, but to me, that's the same thing. Like, I woke up too at 36, that is, though, and I didn't, same thing. So I wasn't into that at all. I wasn't looking for anything. I was looking for healing. I wanted to feel better. And so I had a spontaneous Kundalini awakening as well. And
really?
all of it, yes.
Wow.
So it's crazy. And with that, Christ consciousness came through, which I was really surprised about, because I would have never in a million years thought that was it. I had a couple Buddha statues at home, but that was about it. So,
that's amazing. I've never met anyone else that's actually had one.
Really?
Like that I've just encountered randomly this way. Yeah, no.
It's really
that's
fucking
interesting.
funny.
Yeah, I know, that's amazing.
Yeah, but also
It's pretty
yeah.
rare, I think, to have it spontaneous that way. It's fairly rare, I
Yeah.
think. So yeah, no, that's amazing. That's great.
Yeah, I don't know, but it was like kind of, kind of the real process to like work through and to be where I am now. And I'm assuming it would be the same for you, especially when you're coming from a completely different background. And then to step into this. But the question that I want to ask you is, how is it for you challenging to, or is it challenging to you to incorporate Christ consciousness into your earthly beingness, because we can talk about these things like a whole lot, right? And we can be all love and light, but how does it go together when we're actually interacting with people? And this is not meant to be like, I'm not trying to poke. And if ever you don't want to answer, don't answer. Just let me know.
I'm an open book.
Okay.
I love it all. All the juicy stuff is the most exciting stuff for me. So, I would say that the most challenging part of this experience for me has been awakening to understanding I'm more than what I thought. Like even the goodness I could conceive in me was much, much less than my potential goodness, you could say. Right. Okay. So the Christedness awakens, I guess. And I'm sure you've had this experience where you're like, I am all of this. Yeah. Like I'm all of this. Of course I am. Yeah. Now, then there becomes this process of pulling the human self away of that. Because that association of I am all of this, if that's attached to the human body, we're going to encounter a lot of confusion and issues with that, because we're now thinking that the human self is God, which is false idolatry. It's going to cause lots of misaligned activity, which will just build karma, and that's all perfect too, right? But so the most challenging part is first, stepping away, like relinquishing that human body. Most of us will go through varying things. So for me, I went through a period where it felt like my bones were breaking and like my skin was on fire, blood boiling type feeling, just really intense feelings, but associated while that you still feel this presence of sort of the nurturing divine mother kind of holding you, cradling you during this. So I feel like this is the sort of preemptive stage to birthing the Christ, which is where we're working on mastery. I don't know if I'll get to that Christ state in this lifetime. So in this lifetime, I think my goal really is just to achieve what we call here mastery. What I recall it as from my order, it's the Melchizedek, which is the order that Yeshua came from. We call mastery adepthood, because the only mastery is unification with divine. So you don't ever achieve mastery. So there's a bit of a different framing, but that's essentially where I'm trying to get to, where, and the hardest part is forgiving myself, I think, for any transgression, right? So, it's really interesting you asked, because just today, I was thinking about, there's a person in I was getting a sandwich for my son in Subway, and there was a lady in there ordering, and she was just being very abrupt and rude with her order. And I noticed my judgment of her, right? And I'm like, why don't I see the immaculacy of her? Why don't I see her immaculate being? Like, why don't I see this, right? What's happened here? And I felt so bad, like I'm crying in Subway almost, because I'm so guilty for not seeing the perfection in this person. So these are some of the challenges that I would say that are the deepest for me, as well as when we talk, when I on my platform, I'm talking and I'm saying things. I have very eclectic beliefs. They're all over the place. Everything for me unifies into the one, but I play in all the worlds, like the galactic stuff and the druid. I'm a druid as well. So I'm into all the different worlds, very eclectic that way. And so when I'm talking, people then sometimes will presume that I'm Jesus-like or something. And then this can cause some issues there too. Like, where essentially I will preach Christ consciousness, and then I might have a moment of irritation, right? And then I'm judging myself a lot. But now others are like, oh, well, you did this before and you did that and you were angry. Yeah, I mean, I'm still human, right? I haven't relinquished the body. I'm still here, guys, right?
Yeah,
So,
exactly. Yeah, totally. That was exactly where my question was going. And I actually made a video about this on my channel as well, because I all of a sudden felt, the person that I was showing on YouTube, with the readings that I do, because they come through very high consciousness, very, Christ light. So this is a different stage. And I try to explain that I have a lot of shadow. And this is like my human self incorporated. And I still, of course, and I think this will keep going till I die, till I transition. I will still have to incorporate shadow if that's what I want, if that's what I choose to do. I'm not necessarily striving for mastery or aptness or anything like that. I'm just striving for living a good life, like living my best life, living a happy life. That's what I strive for. And
that's probably better. That's probably better.
I don't know. It's just a different approach, I think.
It's the pressure, the ego, all of these things, like even the idea that I need to do anything to achieve anything is an egoic thing, right? So it's like, like you said, that you're the sort of laid back kind of look at that is so much more, I would say, so much more peaceful. This is my shadow right there is being displayed, right? I would say, as the human aspect of myself, is that there's this drive to be perfect here, and I don't think that I will necessarily get there. And there's that guilt around that as well, right?
That is so interesting that you're saying this, because and so like strong of you, and I love that you're being so open. Like you're saying, you're really an open book, because I'm thinking maybe I need to go where you are, but I don't feel the drive to do so. That's the interesting thing. But every time I hear people talk about stuff like that, I'm like, wow. It's just like, whoa.
There's a part of us that gets really excited when we're like, oh, I can do something better and do it better or something. Like we get this idea that part of us goes, oh, there's a prescription I can follow, right? There's a way I can go. But what I've come to learn, what the mother told me really quickly in my journey, was just, you don't choose the pace of this. This at this stage, when you've awakened and started to birth that way, you're now in the womb of the mother. Like you don't choose the pacing. So if you're inclined to push yourself the way I do, you may move a little quicker in experience in linear time. It's irrelevant though. The time part of it is illusory and just falls away, and we forget it all. The time just falls away. So at the end of that birthing process, it doesn't matter if it took us hundreds and hundreds of lifetimes or even thousands. And all of that pressure that we put on ourselves is imagined, basically. And so even as I put it on myself, I try to remind myself I'm imagining this too, right? Like, so I think being that self-reflective in our day-to-day is generally the best recipe for success because when we realize that everything we see is always reflecting something inside, then all we can do is choose to either look at that in like a light of truth, or we can resist it and fight it, right? And that's why I really enjoy the narcissist topic, is because what most people don't notice in that dynamic is both beings are dependent on each other. Like they may notice that, and psychologists will notice that, but they're dependent upon each other. They're both codependent in their perfectly mirrored ways, right? There's a purpose to the empathic or the giving soul to call for someone to give to, because that's the only way they know how to find value, right? Wow. I need to give myself to you. Oof. Otherwise, what am I here for? Right?
Wow. Yeah, totally.
And the narcissists, I'm here for me, and give me you. Sure, that's great.
Holy shit, yeah.
It's a perfect match. Both of them are tremendously uncomfortable, though.
Yeah.
Both of them are suffering. Both of them are detached and suffering in various ways because of the ways they're judging each other, judging themselves. And what I'm trying to help illustrate with what I offer is that there isn't really fundamentally that much of a difference in the beings. That really the difference is trauma response. That's really the only difference. And you have two traumatized individuals bouncing each other's trauma off of each other, creating this explosive dynamic. And of course it sucks, right? Yeah. And if we can step out, and I'm saying this as someone, you know, one of my experiences, I had just to give an example of something that I've went through in my life so people know that I have experience in these things. I had someone befriend me and was friends with me for a semester to then set me up to be mugged and robbed. Like that was I'm not certain that was the that was the actual full plan from the beginning, but we became friends, and then they set me up to be robbed, and I was attacked with bats and things. And it was I was like 16 or so, maybe 15 or 16.
Yeah.
And so that's the type of behavior that, whether he planned that or just to kind of save his self-image in front of his friends, was like, yeah, okay, guys, let's do that. Is very, very, you know, kind of dark, kind of sadistic or cruel, right? Yeah. And so, of course, the only reason I talk about all of these things is because it's only through forgiving that like I forget that even happened, you know. These things don't even occur to me to talk about. Like you had mentioned actually, like, well, maybe we'll talk about some of your experience. And I'm like, whoa, when did this happen? I couldn't even see it. I'm like, when have I had these experiences? Because I've forgiven them all pretty much. So, but I wanted to just give an example that, like, I understand the feelings. And of course, I actually see, after awakening, you probably would agree with this, that the world's kind of backwards. You know, like, we are all one, yet the world seems to act as if we're separate. And everyone seems to, not everyone, but the majority of people seem to agree that we're separate. And all the systems and everything we've built has denied God. However we see God, source, creator, universe, whatever. We've kind of taken that out of it, made everything separate. It's all backwards. And so what I like to remember is, of course, people are messed up, right? That's where I try to find that, like, compassion, like, for the people that have done horrible things just in self-interest, or just, you know, from seemingly nowhere, that and us who are more compassionate perhaps, or more empathic, can't fathom that behavior. Just as we can't fathom their behavior, they can't fathom ours either, right?
That is interesting. That's an interesting point. But that would be right, thinking about it, because the narcissist, or I don't even know if we should call people with NPD the narcissist, or because they're just as much a person.
It's very just minimizing, I find, if we do that. But at the same time, we are talking about it. How do you talk about it, right? So, yeah.
So,
I'd like to,
a person with, go ahead.
I just wanted to say, so just to give an example of why a narcissistic individual isn't going to be open-hearted, compassionate. They just don't understand that. And here, the reason is that the consciousness is a frequency, right? It vibrates it oscillates up and down as a sine wave in a frequency. And so the more forgiving and less judgmental you are, essentially, the more open-hearted and more accepting you are, expansive you are, the higher your frequency raises. A lot of people associate this with, like, diet and things like that. But that's actually a reflection of your frequency raising. Like you're going to change your diet as your frequency raises. And then you're going to tell people that are eating crap that they should change that because it will raise their frequency. But that's not true. Their frequency raises and the diet changes to accommodate. So the frequency is first. The frequency is always first, right? Everything's energy and then becomes manifest, right? So of course, if we focus on the energy first, that's where we figure out where things come from. So a narcissist is low frequency, tight, constricted, fear, right? Low frequency underneath 200, which is the line of integrity. And if people are interested in consciousness mapping, Dr. David Hawkins wrote multiple books on power versus force. I'm sure a lot of people have seen that consciousness scale with the colors that goes from 0 to 1,000. But that's where that comes from. So if you're under the line of integrity, you're vibrating at a frequency that cannot observe truth. It cannot observe truth. When you're in a higher frequency, which is where a lot of times the empathic person is, and they're in a higher truth-based frequency, they're like, I see the more compassionate way this could have all been handled. Like I see the better way very clearly. And why wouldn't they do that, right? Why wouldn't they do that? They can't see it. They can't see it. The best way to them is the way they went.
Oh my God. Yeah.
And Socrates said as well that he was talking men and women, but he said all men do precisely what they believe is the best thing to do. That's all they ever do. Now, sometimes what they think is the best is utterly stupid, right? But it's still what they could think was the best. And if we think of frequency, if their thought and feeling emotional frequencies are down low, they're going to act in that vibration, right? So of course they're the way they were. How else could they be? They couldn't be any other way. So it then becomes our responsibility to step back from our expectation a little, because they couldn't have behaved differently as much as we wish they could.
Is that really true? I'm really questioning, is that really true? Because, from I get, and I had just had a moment there when you said the best way to them is the best way they went. And that makes a lot of sense to me. Like that really does make a lot of sense. And I do understand. And I worked through, like I said, a lot of the forgiveness processes which often started within myself, like accepting myself. And then I could accept the parts in the other much more easily and actually bring about the compassion. So it really was an internal process. I didn't really need the other person to complete or to forgive or anything like that. But I'm really wondering, especially when you're talking like really malicious stuff, was there really no other chance? Or why was it done? Especially when we're talking about, narcissistic.
There is an opportunity. Sorry. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I get excited.
Me too. So it's just like the question that I'm posing here that I would like to pose, and I'm very open to what you're saying. I'm not saying this is a no or I'm against it. I love listening to that and then expanding my own mind, but I would probably need some time to think about it. Hence, I would also like the questions so you can actually answer and say what you're meaning, because to me, it's like, was there really no other way? Me, I grew up with a narcissistic parent, with a narcissistic mother who was really manipulative, really malicious, really, trying to sabotage me. And there was no love. And I found that out very late. Like I found that out through the awakening, actually. I didn't know anything about narcissism until then. And that's like my background. Oh, here you go. So that's the thing. And then you're all of a sudden awake to all of this and you're wondering, like, how is this even possible? Of course, I worked through many of these processes and I do understand. I came to the same conclusion as you did, that empath and narcissists are just two sides of the same coin, the very same coin, that have possibly the same wounding even, and then they emerge in different ways. And you and I touched on that briefly in our private conversation, like, and I don't know this. Do we choose to come here and be an empath? Do we choose to come here and be a narcissist? But again, the question that I would like to pose, do they really have to act that way? Like, I get the frequency thing, but then there is a choice, right? We always have a choice.
Yeah, so the choice, so it's a perfect question. It's a perfect question. So The choice is always between love or fear. This density of consciousness is called the third density. And this third density is called the choice. So right here in this illusion of physicality, we don't understand love really, right? So we can think about concepts, but we can't really grasp what love actually is. We could talk about familial love or romantic love or whatever. We can have flavors of love that we consider love, but that's not truly what love is. And because we're veiled to that, we're essentially choosing love, which is true and real, or fear, which is separation, nothingness, and false. That's what we're choosing. So yes, they had an opportunity to choose. So when I say they couldn't have done differently, what I mean is their response, if a response is made at all, will be in that frequency. Unless they know, oh, I've dropped into low frequency, I'm experiencing fear, this is unreal, I'm going to transmute this and move into the light. And they don't know how to do that, right? They generally, right? So to expect them to do that is very it's unreasonable for someone that's not self-aware at all, which is a narcissistic person is essentially very unaware of self in many ways, very blinded, right? Lots of inner barriers. Don't look here, don't look there, don't see that, don't see this, right?
Yeah.
Constricted and protected. So that individual will, essentially not be open to the idea that there's a better, peaceful way to make their experience better, make the others experience, like they just don't see it.
Yeah.
So the choice is, do they believe their fear, which is their fear, defensiveness, it's their protection, their threat, they feel threatened in some way, or they're trying to mitigate a future threat that they perceive in their anxious mind, something they're trying to protect, right? They're always trying to protect or obtain in an effort to feel safe. That's essentially why humans do everything we do, more or less, right? But theirs is sort of constricted into this. So it's not that they didn't have a choice. They do have a choice, but there's also an even larger scale, a larger perspective of it. So they do have choices. They do choose to act or not act, really. But the frequency of the experience that they're going to experience is where their consciousness is at. If they're like a radio antenna, they're tuned to a certain channel. That's what they get as like options to act with. Unless they have an interrupter that they've made with meditation or with some spiritual sadhana, some way to connect to the divine, something to bring presence, even it's as simple as connecting to the moment. Like if they don't have any tool like that and no awareness of it, there's not really any opportunity for them to interrupt this impulsive animalistic urge to act, right?
Yeah.
So essentially below that line of integrity, they're more like animals in the reactivity. So of course they're not animals. I'm not trying to make a hierarchy. I'm just trying to say that they're more running on instinct, egoic instinct, than they are opening and observing and trying to feel things. And they're not interested in that because that's seeing too much of themselves. And so of course they made choices throughout their life to eventually develop into this, right? So one could say they're responsible for all of that, right? But also at some point, we have to recognize that as a soul, the reason we came here is so that we could learn how to experience forgiveness. This is how I like to see this anyways. We came here to learn, we said to our mother, hey, mother, what's forgiveness like? What's it like to be forgiven? And mother's like, I don't know, dear. I don't know what that means. Well, what if I did something bad? Oh, you can't do anything bad, dear. You can't do anything bad. What do you mean? But what if I acted out? What if I did something wrong? Would you and father be upset with me? Would you forgive me? Right? So these were the initial thoughts I feel of why we chose to come down here. we wanted to experience a part of us, a big part of us wanted to experience the capacity to have wrong things happen, and then us forgive that and like see the beauty and love in the other person despite the evidence to the contrary, right?
Yeah.
So I believe that that's the major reason why this reality in many ways was formed, because you can imagine as one, you can't experience even, right? You
can't. I would say no. Yeah. Exactly.
Right. So at the highest level, we chose to express ourselves into probably, an empathic type of role. Like we would have said, okay, I'm going to open my heart up and I'm going to give myself to people. Probably at the higher self level, the higher self is going to be like, okay, in this span of incarnation, you will be codependent and sort of overstimulated, oversensitive sort of type feeling, uncomfortable. Eventually, you'll own that, or that's the lesson. Own the sensitivity, own the open heart, own the feelings, become centered and balanced in that. And I think that that's literally the reason for these setups of these relationships, right? It's for that, and you said it's two sides of the same coin. That's why they get paired together, is the darker side, or the like more fear-based side, the narcissistic selfish side, has an opportunity to view a giving side and see some of the positives. That all of that experience will stick with them, right? Later, karmically, it'll come back. It's all going to come back.
Yeah.
And they're gonna feel it all. All that stuff they shoved away, and the times they manipulated people, and all of that stuff has to come back up. They have to look at that the same way we've been doing with our own healing. They're going to do that. And I don't know about you, but for my life, I've been generally very not malicious. I've been generally quite nice and gentle with people, mostly.
Yeah.
The worst things I've done have said mean things pretty much most of my life. So I don't have a lot that I feel really that I have to forgive myself on. But I can imagine that if I did a lot of really bad things to people and hurt a lot of people, like it could be really hard. And right. So I like to remember that too. Like, let those without sin cast the first stone. Right? Sure. Let divinity decide, right? Let the universe cleanse itself. So, just as you're healing, how would it feel, for example, if you have a shadow and you're aware of it, right? And you're not able to really get through it. And somebody who's a little higher than you on the path, like a teacher, maybe someone you admire, comes to you and says, hey, you're going too slow. You need to really be better at that. Like that's kind of what we're doing when we're engaging with someone that's very selfish and maybe shallow, down lower in the consciousness. We're kind of trying to push them, like we see how this is better. So just be better now.
Interesting. Right? I would immediately reject that, what you were saying. Like if a teacher came up to me, I need to do better, I'd be like, okay, bye.
Like, see you later. Right. So we totally. Start with a conflict. Hey, so I'm going to shame you, and hopefully that will make you better.
Oh, terrible.
That doesn't work. So when we're talking to anyone and we want them to be a little different, approaching with shame is starting a conflict, right?
Yeah.
And so we do this with people that we see that have NPD or are just seemingly very selfish.
Sure.
And a lot of times we don't realize, but we're actually instigating the conflict as the one who feels like we're receiving abuse, and perhaps we are. But there sometimes, and this is not always, but sometimes we're actually instigating because of our shaming. Like they don't even often aren't even conscious of doing anything wrong to us. And then we shame them. That's when they turtle, get defensive, and start putting up the right. So we've actually started the conflict because we saw their selfish behavior as infringing on our being, because we've given them our power and their influence over us. Right? Does that make sense? Their influence over us
Yeah, I see which standpoint you're coming from. Yeah. I see. It sometimes takes me a minute to sorry, the doctor.
No, it's all good. It's all good.
The dog's just like this on his back. Sorry. And it's just staring at me really weirdly. But okay. So now coming back to the topic, it's just like I sometimes need a minute to see where you're coming from, because like you're saying, the things that you're saying are triggering indeed. And sometimes we need a minute to kind of step back and actually listen to what you're saying. So I'm going to ask a couple more questions because and give my 5 cents to this as well, because and I'm trying to come back because there were so many things you said and I wrote a couple of down, so I hope I have a couple of things here. Oh my god, so the ill intent was something that I wanted to touch on still. So the decision, but then again what you said, you described that already. You described it. The thing that sometimes when you speak about these things, I feel it like very much solar plexus, sacral chakra. I feel what you're saying. Like I feel anger is arising in me. I feel there's a little bit of injustice that is done to the shadow self and to the that it was somehow that I could have possibly, if we're talking about me,
blaming the victim type feeling, right? Like perhaps
or triggering the narcissist, right? Okay. Triggering the narcissist to do something. Of course you do, because you lost your boundaries, but I think it's kind of like unfair to put that on a child, like when you're an adult. But although of course adults, when you're saying they should be further along, but sometimes they are not, and sometimes this is exactly what's being brought up, then their own shadow. And to the mean thing, yes, I mean sometimes, and I actually sometimes enjoy basking in my shadow, because I had to suppress it for so long. Like it wasn't there. I was all love and light and I couldn't do anything wrong because I just had to be the good girl so much, although I was the complete rebel. Like I didn't accept anything. So it's an interesting process for me, and I'm just like, yes, I'm bad too, and I love it sometimes. But still with the awareness of, I know what I'm doing. I'm not unaware, and I'm not hurting people or anything. I just like to be in my shadow sometimes, and that's also integrating that, and that has a lot of power, I find. And why do we come here? Now it comes back to me. Why do we come here? I believe the same thing. We're being paired with people with NPD, for example, to learn how to forgive, like you were saying, and to learn how to love even more and deeper. And this is something that I'm totally down for. This is something that I understand, that I deeply, deeply feel. And who better to bring that out within you than someone that has really wronged you, right? And then to, like you were saying, to go up to the higher level, which is also something that happened during the awakening stage. They brought me up to a different level, and there was no forgiving, because it was completely clear that you were paired up with certain people and that you were just, there is no I'm sorry. It doesn't exist, because it's just, and this is interesting. And then you come down with that sort of an information, and you do understand why exactly you were paired up for yourself and for the other person. And then you bring it down to earth though, and all of a sudden you're faced with all the crap. You know what I mean? So you have the higher view, and then there's the crap, and you're just like, yeah, I understood that, but how do I integrate it? How do I actually am living this? Or if you're talking about like a notch heavier, like, and I've been an advocate on my channel for this as well, like anything related to children, basically, anything sexual abuse being related to children, also like the really heavy stuff where your heart just drops and you just, like your whole body's reacting because it's not right. And how do you love a person that has done that to a child? Do you know what I mean? So the really, and this is the thing, and I know it's really, really triggering for people to watch, and it's a really candid topic to touch upon, but these are the things that interest me. Like, how do you integrate that? How do you even start to do
that? I think that's an amazing question, because that is really, because like you said, you start off at sort of the individual traumas that you've experienced, right? But eventually we go, but what about the collective, right? What about the other people? And then we've already seen all the things going on, so it's not hard for us to think of what's occurring in humanity. And then we may choose to go into that further. So what I would say is, first, we'll be drawn into the areas of shadow that karmically are relevant for us. So, you said that you grew up in an experience in childhood with lots of, with a narcissistic experience. So it makes a lot of sense that you'd be really interested in helping children in that area, right? And whether it's narcissistic or worse, just being very compassionate about children. I grew up in a very loving household.
Awesome.
It was good. Of course, we all have our parental issues. There's all these wounds that come up regardless, but so I didn't have that experience so much, but for me, the whole place felt weird. But anyways, so I would say first that's sort of where our attention goes. It's usually indicative of not just this life, but past life things that we've been involved in, right?
For sure.
So that's sort of like the why we are kind of looking at it that way, and why, like, someone like me, I don't look at that as much. However, what I did, this is, and people might hate me for this. So hopefully people understand what I'm trying to do here. But there's a documentary on Jeffrey Epstein on Netflix. So I watched the documentary, and I just actively throughout the documentary considered, how can I love this man? Like, how can I love him? How could I do that? I asked the mother to help me see through the garment. So Jesus said right before he was killed, and I'm not a Christian or anything like that, but Jesus's teachings are very wise. So he said, don't believe what you see here, and this always rings in my mind. This is an illusion. We eventually, just like I said, when we wake up and realize, oh, the time didn't matter, it's the same thing. Now, while we're in it, it doesn't at all feel like that. So I like to express that there's not a rush to forgive people that you don't know how to forgive. Like, if you don't, like, when I'm talking about, like, sometimes we triggered things in them, I am not ever trying to say we blame. What I'm trying to do is balance the responsibility, because like we were saying, they thank you for coming here to mirror this for me, right? Because if you didn't, I wouldn't know, right? I wouldn't have healed this part. I wouldn't have found myself at all, right? I wouldn't have been able to see it. So they've given up, as a soul, they've done the harder job of the two, really. In that respect, they're in a harder place right now than we are. It seems sort of the opposite, but we are sort of on the way into a sort of light, opened up experience. And if we didn't have those experiences as children or later, however they manifest, I had a lot of them as children as well, just not with my parents. If we didn't have those, we just wouldn't be where we are. We wouldn't know ourselves the way we do. We wouldn't have expanded into this. We wouldn't have seen, we wouldn't have questioned our reality. We wouldn't have sought truth. We wouldn't have looked for God. We wouldn't have done these things. So that's one way for us to reason our way into an understanding of why it happened. But that doesn't get us the whole way, right? That just gets us to, I get it. Okay, I get it. Like, that's why it happened. It still hurts. Like, it still hurts a lot, right? So I like to ask God for help with it. I think that part of us has to learn that we are of God, made in God's image. We are here to work with God to transmute these things that we don't know how to do on our own. Like, help me see the Christ, or to help me see the divinity in this being, right? By the end of the Jeffrey Epstein season, I was able to say I loved him. And it's not that I love what his human, right? You see through the human, there's a spark behind the human that you have to work to see. I don't know how else to say that. You have to really try to see that sometimes, especially in situations like that. And I would never even recommend anyone try to do that unless they are like me and they're like, let's test myself. Like, this was a conscious, I decided to try to do this. Normally I wouldn't want to consume that type of content, right? But I thought, well, how better to try to get into this than to just throw myself in the fire, so to speak, right? To look at something that is just, I don't know how to fathom it, and try to wrap my head around forgiving and loving that person. And what it ends up being is that you're not actually forgiving the person, because the person isn't real. The person is a membrane that covers the divinity. And, we get lost sometimes looking at the costume. A lot of people will talk about when we reach sainthood, essentially sainthood or mastery, we realize that the body is just a garment, and the personality, the identity is just a garment we wear to do things. Like, most of the day, I tend to just sit and look at things. If I'm not watching my children, right? I'm just sitting. I'm not doing really anything. It's more like I'm pretending to be a human most of the time. And when I found that when I got to that stage, I was able to just see through the human, because I'm not as associated with the human identity as I was after the awakening. And it's easier to see through the veneer of pretend, really. It's make believe, and that doesn't minimize the suffering, because while the suffering is happening, while we're in it, it's so real. It's so real, so painful. It's only after we see through it that we're like, oh, okay, wow, nothing even happened. It's a very hard thing to describe to anyone. So there's a threshold sort of that you pop through, and you'll see this, and then you might dip back down. So, kind of, you might oscillate up and down into this seeing. And so essentially, that's the route I try to go, is try to will it, like, and ask for God, right? Like, I know that, like, metaphysically or spiritually, my beliefs are that the world mirrors me, right? I know that. I believe that. And I'm observing someone that's done something terrible to children. So what is this mirror, right? What does it mirror? It mirrors the destruction of innocence, right? That's really what it mirrors. Like, if we really push it down to its root, that's really, I think, what that's about, that behavior. It's about taking innocence, because taking innocence is like taking the godliness or holiness from something. And so this is why it hurts us so much to see it. And essentially, the more innocence we've removed from ourselves, like, the more it will manifest in the world, right? The more we see ourselves as broken, not innocent, horrendous little beings, the more that type of thing happens. So I'm
not sure about this, to be quite frank with you, because I'm really, like, I'm a deep shadow diver. I think this is the way I was built. So to me, it's like, the more I look at this within myself and imagine the possibilities in that direction, like, under what circumstances, this is my mindset, would I ever be able to do something like this? This is like my approach to the topic. And to be quite frank, I have not been willing or able to exactly go there. But I know, because I'm a human being, that I probably could, under some circumstances, when I'm really, you don't know this. And this is the thing too. And I know this is really, really hard stuff to listen to, especially if you have been a victim of child abuse, if you have been the person that has gone through it. This is a completely different type of an approach as to someone that has not gone through it and is talking about this stuff, and then hearing them say, like, oh yeah, forgiveness and love, and it's all it's all good. There's bound to be feelings, or not just triggeredness, I don't even want to use that word, but that's very understandable, and it's okay that way. I think maybe The people that are going through this came here like a lot stronger, like very, very old souls is my approach to the topic, that are actually able to withstand such things. Because if you're not ready to experience that sort of thing, like that taken away of innocence, that taken away of godliness, or how you put it, then it's completely destroying you. And most people, it does completely destroy them regardless. And I don't know how this is playing out over several lifetimes, but this is something that has been so much on my mind. And now that we're talking about it, actually, it's coming back, because like I have had to witness stuff like this, and it's like it's just like a topic that is, it's really, really hard to a really hard topic to touch on, and to, you know, to come from this place of maybe imagining how to forgive that person, or to come back to that place of love and light. Maybe I don't want to, maybe I don't want to do this in that lifetime, you know what I mean? Maybe I don't have to.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, you don't have to. You know, yeah, you don't have to. You don't have to do anything, right? For sure. If we don't feel ready to forgive, then there's not really a point in, you know, talking. They're probably not, someone's listening to us talk and me saying forgiveness, they're probably like, yeah, right, screw you, right? So that's and that's okay. And that's okay. I respect that, honor that entirely. I'm only speaking from the other side of forgiveness, where I feel, right, I feel like this is clearly the way. So but as far as what you touched on, something very, very important, I think, when you were talking about how I can't imagine myself doing this, like, so how could this be mirroring almost, right? Like, because I wouldn't, our minds are very literal usually, right? So when we see something in the world, like a situation like this, we think that it's mirroring what we would do. It's mirroring the part of us that destroyed our own innocence, right? We're a collective, so we did that. In other words, that part of us was done, which is why you're witnessing it. That's a part of us too. So it's not that you as an individual human being could understand or fathom that, right? Like, it's not that part of it that's being mirrored. But as a soul, as a soul, which is essentially tapped in always to the Akash, always connected to all other souls here, you agreed that this is what we got to do, guys, because they don't see. We have to do this. And so what ends up happening is then people start to play these roles to show, to manifest the destruction of innocence, and however they do that. And so you see the destruction of innocence in various forms throughout humanity's history, in different ways. The crucifixion of Christ, you know, so you see it all over the place, and it's all symbolic of the same thing. So it's not that whenever we're looking at mirrors and thinking mirroring, we have to step out of the details of the specific things that are done in the literal linear reality. This is my advice anyways, try to think symbolically, in a narrative almost, like what the subconscious speaks to us only in pictures and sound and story, right? Like, to really get the truth of the matter, we have to stop thinking about it and feel into what's the story here. And what's truly rattling me so much. It's not that this is happening, it's that it's so atrocious. It's so dark that I can't even, oh my gosh, right? But what does that darkness represent? And you know, I feel that it's the destruction of innocence, or holiness, pulling holiness, right? And so if we are able to notice the symbolism, we destroyed our innocence when we believed that we were not eternal, infinite beings having temporary experiences in varying vessels or varying bodies. We destroyed our own innocence through our beliefs that formed from society and all these various things as we grew as humans. And we will mirror this destruction of our holiness, our divinity, our innocence. We will not give ourselves grace. We will not give ourselves mercy. We will keep pushing and pushing. The more, that's why I said, the more horrendous we believe we are, the more hurtful we become. It's sort of, whatever we speak in many ways is sort of like, and so it is. You know, the Divine Mother, everyone has their own sort of reality, right? If I say God hates me, life sucks, everything's garbage, the Divine Mother, which is the womb of creation, which is this illusion, just says, and so it is. You know, that's what you have, right? So it's not about like ignoring the negativity. There's a really great spiritual teacher that I've liked. I just found him a day or two ago, but
interesting.
Michael Murdad, and he says, you know, respect the illusion, but honor the truth, like honor God, right? Like the truth is that I'm not this limited being. So I can respect the feelings that are coming through this and in the illusion, and I can respect all of this story, all of the pain. It's all very real to me. But also it's not, right? There is that other side. And the more we do that, the more that actually becomes very tangibly clear to us.
Yeah.
That's when forgiveness becomes really accessible. I found in my experience, like it's while we're in it and like really hard and stuck to it and really hurting, it's not really the right time usually to forgive. You know, it's just not. Absolutely. Because we're hurting. So we need to move through that. And I like to recommend literally just talking to God about it. Give God some sass, you know, and why would you do this to me? Right.
Yeah.
You'll get some answers usually, I find.
Yeah.
So.
Wow. I love this. I also very much resonate with respect the illusion, but honor God, you said, right?
Yeah. I don't know exactly what Michael Murdad says, but he says, respect the illusion, but honor God or honor the truth. I can't remember exactly what he says, but it, you know, he just made me realize, okay, yeah. Respect it's important to respect
full on
what's being experienced, but also remember that it's an illusion. Yeah. Because everything here is separate, right? It's a separation. It can't be real. It can't be. It has to be a sort of holograph in a way, but we feel it and we're experiencing it. And, you know, I don't know about you, but when I had my Kundalini awakening, I was able to, I suddenly saw inside everything for a period of time where I could see sort of almost the structure of inside of things. And it was just light. It's all just light. It's nothing. It's all the same thing. You know, it's a singularity. So in the singularity, there's nothing moving independently. There's not a person acting against you. The against you is with you. You know, there's
absolutely. Oh my God, yeah.
Right. So you can't act independently. You're a wave on the ocean. You move with the ocean. You're not choosing all the stuff that we think we are. We're just not.
No, that was so interesting because to me, I could see with the eyes of the divine, if you so will, or with my higher self, however you want to call that. To me, it was incredible because even with people that I had feuds with, there was nothing but love. Like I had no other chance, and I could totally see how they were projecting because, of course, before I had projected as well. But in that moment, I was no longer projecting, and that radiated such peace that we never had a quarrel. Like even after that time passed, where I could see everything with those eyes, it was incredible, but it was also, it was incredible.
Very contrasting, right? Yeah.
It is so contrasting, but it was so cool too. It taught me a lot.
Yeah. For me, that blissed out kind of weird state lasted for about 7 days. Wow, and then I woke up and it was gone and I was back to my ego and I was like, what happened? But I was also very different suddenly. So, you know, everything changed from there, but yeah, that was great.
One question, did your eye color change by any chance anywhere on that stage? Like, did you have a different eye color?
Throughout my life, my eyes have changed a bit. I actually have a theory that they brightened a little, that they brightened out. Like I have kind of bright blue eyes, but if you look at pictures of me prior to my awakening, they look a little darker. They're not quite so bright. They're not quite, it's like I'm clouded over. I'm not there, you know, the soul's not awake, right? So Yeah, I noticed that. And then also, you know, I'm embarrassed to say this, but on my YouTube channel, I used to be a YouTube, like I'd play video games on YouTube, right?
Oh, okay.
But I left all that up to show that, like the transition, to show the weirdness of it all, right? But yeah, so if you go back to that, you almost see that I'm just I'm not even the same person at all, really.
Wow.
Yeah, so I've totally shifted and changed. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, same here. Very interesting. Very, very interesting. The reason why I'm asking eye color is because I sometimes I haven't had this in a while, but I had like a violet hue like on my iris, and this was absolutely visible. And my son even, and he was way younger back then, I think like 2 years or something. And he was 2 or 3 years, something like that. And he was mentioning to me that all of a sudden, mommy, you're two. Like he woke up at night and saw me, you're two. And wow, you're golden. Like he woke up at night to another incident where he was like, wow, you have gold here, you have golden hair, you have golden skin. And then, oh, it was incredible. Like the things he used to say when he was smaller and still very open to these things, that I hadn't imposed anything on him. And I still don't, because I don't believe in that. I believe if he's interested in these things, he'll come to me, then I can maybe help him with some of the experiences, but I will not tell him. Well, if he's asking, I'll tell him like my point of view, but I'll also tell him that it's my point of view and my experiences. Yeah.
Yeah, I do basically the same things with my kids.
Interesting.
But I tell them I'm a wizard. And the other day, my daughter said, hey, do you know daddy's a wizard and he talks to trees? And she was talking to someone else.
Awesome.
And I was like, yeah, I mean, I do. I tell them about it. I openly talk about it. I don't push anything, of course, but I talk about whatever. I'll put my hand on a tree and say hello to it. And then I'll tell my daughter, oh, this is grandpa tree. Grandpa tree says hello, and stuff like that. So
I love it.
Even if they don't I don't care if they believe, but it's very magical, I think, for them. And for me, I'm feeling something with the tree. For them, they're just thinking, whoa, what's going on? He's talking to a tree. So I do that stuff, but I don't try to philosophize or teach anything really with them other than try to be kind, right?
Yeah, same here with the trees, and I think they're like sponges anyways. And so I don't know if my son actually is tapped into the trees. He just loves trees naturally, but I do that too. Like I talk to the trees as well. And this is also something that I always loved trees, but I didn't talk to them. And through like the whole awakening, because I needed them so much too, like they helped me a lot with the energies, because there were all of a sudden so much energy and I just didn't know what to do with it. Like you were saying, like burning skin, I had like, oh my God, like hands, feet, all that stuff. Oh my God, so much. But we could probably both write a book about this, I guess. But yeah, in a way, I think I'm probably, now that I'm thinking about it, of course, I'm influencing him in that direction a bit, because I am just who I am in that stage, and that can't go unnoticed by any child. So
that's my thing, is like I'm a wizard. Right. So I'll be as I am, and as long as I'm not pressuring my children, I feel okay with it.
Totally. So good. Thank you so much for taking the time and for being so outspoken, and also for touching on some of the harder topics and being willing to go there with me and to give your standpoint, which I really, really appreciate, because this is why I invited you.
Thank you.
So it could be like a back and forth. And because if you're staying with your own mindset and not expand or not just listen to something else too, that'll be very, I don't know, it's not very fun. So thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. This was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed the conversation. Cool. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Same. Awesome. So we'll put all of Sean Kelly's information down below. If you do have any questions, please hit us up. You can post them either in my comment section or in Sean's comment section if you do have any questions. And yeah, we'll see how you guys are perceiving this. We hope it was also not just triggering to you, but also insightful and helpful, because this is why we did this. And if you want us to do more, or me to invite other guests, however, I haven't even spoken to Sean if he
I'll come on again.
Willing to do another.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, cool. Okay, Cool. So if you want us to do another one, just let us know in the comments as well. Thank you so much, Sean. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Me too. Me too. Thank you.
Okay. Sorry, I just did something. Hang on.
Oh no.